The war had ended, but Britain's silence sounded heavier than its triumphal songs. Beneath the bunting and smoke, the Empire's breath was shallow, its purse nearly empty. London's skyline stood fractured, proud, and tired, its cathedrals echoing prayers for solvency, not salvation. Victory had been purchased on credit, and the interest was already due. Factories slept in dust, while America's engines hummed across oceans of production and promise. Britain still called itself powerful, yet the mirror of debt revealed another portrait entirely. The pound, once the planet's compass, drifted like a ship without stars or sail. Its paper looked familiar, but faith, the invisible ink, had begun to fade. In Whitehall, ministers drafted gratitude dressed as diplomacy, polite appeals for American loans. Washington listened with sympathy and calculation, understanding empires die more quietly than they are born. The Marshall Plan arrived gilded in generosity, weighted with American arithmetic and global ambition. Britain accepted, smiling through humiliation disguised as partnership. The Bank of England, custodian of an empire's self-belief, now balanced debt with decorum. Its marble corridors echoed the whisper of ration books, not the rustle of bullion bags. Officials measured prosperity in promises, not production, reciting numbers like hymns for reassurance. The war had proved courage, peace would now test endurance. At home, the people rebuilt brick by brick, borrowing confidence from fading imperial memory. Each paycheck carried nostalgia for pounds that once ruled oceans and seasons alike. But gold had grown mythic, and myths do not feed nations long enough. Austerity replaced adventure, and imagination was taxed at every till. Still, pride refused surrender. The empire rebranded itself as Commonwealth. Heritage renamed diplomacy. Flags were folded into friendship. Colonies became partners in a theatre of polite decline. The pound remained the symbol of continuity, familiar, dignified, increasingly decorative. Every note whispered, "We still matter," even as the world priced otherwise. Across the Atlantic, the dollar learned to roar, its paper backlit by industry and optimism. New York's skyline eclipsed London's fog. Wall Street replaced the city as civilization's metronome. Britain's strength now depended on America's patience and petrol from the Middle East. The empire traded command for consultation, and few noticed when that trade became habit. By 1949, arithmetic broke through ceremony. The government admitted what markets already knew. Sterling was overvalued, pride was unaffordable. Fate required adjustment. Devaluation arrived like confession, a clean word hiding a dirty truth. The pound fell, and with it, the illusion of imperial invincibility. Still, citizens queued calmly, dignified in disappointment, measuring loss in shillings, not tares. They believed recovery inevitable, because Britain had always recovered, eventually. But recovery without innovation is nostalgia rehearsed as policy. The bank printed stability, but belief, once shaken, prints slower than ink. Through the 1950s, optimism bloomed again, suburban and televised. New houses, new gadgets, new credit, modernity on installments, empire on layaway. Politicians promised prosperity within our means, though no one defined those means precisely. The nation smiled politely at its own overdraft. Export markets shifted toward faster hands. Germany rebuilt, Japan reinvented efficiency. Britain relied on memory, branding its caution as virtue, its hesitation as heritage. The pound remained a gentleman's currency, respectable, recognizable, slowly irrelevant. In drawing rooms and boardrooms, denial became diplomacy. Harold Macmillan's voice-filled wireless sets. Most of our people have never had it so good. For a moment, it felt true. Comfort sold on credit, optimism wrapped in advertising. But arithmetic, patient and merciless, waited beneath the surface of celebration. Growth financed by debt always collects its applause before its invoice. The early 1960s introduced color television, miniskirts, and quiet fiscal dread. Exports declined, imports swelled, deficits whispered louder than the Beatles' harmonies. The pound's exchange rate stood firm only by ministerial theatre and borrowed confidence. Each quarter, officials promised balance next year, and next year never arrived. By 1967, illusions cracked. Harold Wilson, composed yet cornered, appeared before cameras heavy with unavoidable words. The pound, he announced, would be devalued to defend its strength, a contradiction worthy of empire. Markets read between syllables. Investors ran faster than reassurance could follow. 14% vanished overnight. Dignity fell faster. Foreign headlines sneered. Allies sympathized, and Britain pretended not to hear. Devaluation became vocabulary, not event, an accepted condition of national weather. The pound had entered its long winter. Through the 1970s, inflation arrived uninvited and refused to leave. Oil embargoes strangled supply. Strikes paralyzed production. Pay packets shrank by payday. Numbers replaced Morales headlines, 10%, 15, 20, each higher than yesterday's hope. The empire's descendants now queued for fuel instead of conquest. Inside the bank, governors scribbled forecasts like confessions. Interest rates rose, then rose again, chasing a monster that fed on confidence. Monetary policy became prayer. Economics became exorcism. Yet belief kept burning, because disbelief felt treasonous. By 1976, the arithmetic demanded public humiliation. Britain requested an International Monetary Fund loan from an institution it once designed. The gesture was global theatre, the inventor begging permission from its invention. A check arrived, stamped with conditional sovereignty. Newspapers called it rescue. Historians call it repentance. The pound was saved, but salvation carried foreign signatures. London learned what its colonies once knew. Debt rewrites power quietly, and the empire of debt had come home to claim its due. Still, entrance hardened into identity. Britain accepted scarcity with stoicism, transforming survival into symbolism. Even decline, done elegantly, looked dignified under drizzle and understatement. The pound limped on, less currency, more chronicle. Late 70s Britain oscillated between defiance and despair. Factories closed, unemployment climbed, pride persisted, stubborn as a lighthouse in fog. A new rhetoric emerged, discipline as deliverance, markets as moral compass. The stage was set for ideology to wear the mask of rescue. Margaret Thatcher entered history like a storm in perfect hair and perfect certainty. She preached salvation through austerity, strength through suffering, faith through fiscal fire. Inflation was her enemy, and the pound her chosen weapon. The nation prepared to bleed for belief once more. Interest rates soared, industries collapsed. Streets shook with strikes and sermons, but the pound stiffened, anchored by ideology rather than arithmetic. For the first time in decades, it rose, not by worth, but by will. The Iron Lady had turned sentiment into scaffolding. Abroad, investors admired the performance, conviction disguised as competence. Britain's currency became symbol again, proof that discipline could still look divine. At home, the cost was visible: unemployment, unrest, unease behind the curtain of confidence. But symbols spend easily when nations need stories. By the dawn of the 1980s, London's skyline shimmered with contradiction, financial towers rising from industrial ashes, ambition rehearsing revival against arithmetic fatigue. The pound survived, scarred but breathing, its crown dented yet unfallen. The empire was gone, but its ghost had learned to trade. The fall had begun decades earlier, but only now did the nation name it. Power had shifted from possession to persuasion, from empire to exchange rate. Britain no longer ruled the world's money. It managed the world's memory of when it did. And memory, though priceless, pays no dividends. Thatcher's Britain entered the 80s armed with conviction, calculation, and a convenient enemy, inflation. Factories were sacrificed like pawns to protect accuracy, too proud to bend again. Interest rates climbed above comfort, slicing through mortgage holders and manufacturers alike. The pound, newly muscular, stood gleaming beneath fluorescent policy light. Admired yet unaffordable, the government called it discipline. The people called it drought. Investors called it opportunity. Poverty deepened in shadows, while profits blazed in the city's mirrored towers. Old Britain, industrial, tangible, soot-stained, withered under the weight of monetary purity. In its place, a new religion was written in digits and deregulation. 1986 arrived with the Big Bang, a detonation of glass, data, and deregulated ambition. The city transformed overnight. Bowler hats replaced by briefcases humming with terminals and telephones. Young traders sprinted where clerks once strolled, selling certainty faster than it could be verified. The Bank of England adjusted, observing chaos as evolution disguised as efficiency. Money shed its accent, its smell, its patience. It moved at the speed of light. The pound joined this digital masquerade. No longer coin, but confidence coded in circuits. London glowed again, not imperial, but algorithmic, a metropolis of leveraged dreams. The empire returned, reimagined through pixels and percentages. Britain congratulated itself on modernity, mistaking movement for progress, volatility for vitality. Each market boom was celebrated as destiny redeemed, each crash forgiven as innovation's fee. The pound's value danced daily, its rhythm dictated by traders half its age. What kings once decreed, now computers negotiated in microseconds. Still, the old pride lingered beneath the neon. The Bank of England spoke softly, slower than markets, older than their memory. Its governors pretended control, raising eyebrows when they could no longer raise interest. Control had become choreography, elegant, rehearsed, largely symbolic. By the early 90s, the performance met its paradox. Britain joined Europe's exchange rate mechanism, pegging pride to continental arithmetic. It promised stability, cooperation, and harmony, all the words empires use before revolt. The pound stood tethered to others' confidence, and confidence, as ever, cracked first. Black Wednesday, 1992. Speculators smelled weakness like blood in monetary water. George Soros, currency pirate turned prophet, bet billions against Britain's resolve. Within hours, the bank spent fortunes defending illusion, then surrendered with parliamentary politeness. The pound collapsed, the government blushed. The empire of arithmetic learned humility again. Irony dripped from headlines. The nation that taught the world finance had been schooled by it. Yet disaster disguised deliverance. Freed from Europe's fixed chains, sterling began to breathe again. Markets adored volatility. Speculators returned. The city resumed its favorite sermon, profit through chaos. Britain stumbled forward, older, humbler, but still unbroken. The late 90s arrived gilded and global, an age of screens and self-belief. Tony Blair promised modern Britain, cosmopolitan, corporate, perpetually online. The Bank of England gained formal independence, a gesture dressed as progress and prudence. Policy became technocracy. Democracy outsourced complexity to economists in bespoke-com. Interest rates were calibrated like art, fractionally, clinically, invisibly. Inflation stayed tame, wages steady, optimism domesticated by data. The pound seemed reborn. Its heartbeat cinched with globalization's smooth algorithmic hum. London's skyline grew taller than its empire ever dreamed, but beneath that steel and software, imbalance whispered its quiet prophecy. Growth leaned on debt, consumption on credit, stability on borrowed foreign confidence. Britain's prosperity was global now, and global means fragile, borrowed, reversible. The bank understood, yet history had taught it to manage collapse, not prevent it. Then came 2008, the century's arithmetic reckoning. Banks imploded, markets convulsed, the word liquidity became a prayer muttered in boardrooms. The pound plunged as fear rewrote physics, and credit evaporated faster than courage. The empire of debt had eaten its own architects. In a single week, the nation rediscovered dependency, not on colonies, but on confidence itself. The Bank of England cut rates to ghosts, printed promises called quantitative easing. It manufactured trust from thin air, just as it had 3 centuries earlier. The system survived, because belief, once monetized, rarely admits death. Britain called it stimulus. Philosophers called it resurrection, cynics called it denial. Money had lost mass entirely, existing only as memory in a machine's temporary storage. The pound no longer represented labor or gold. It represented hope postponed indefinitely. And hope, once digital, can expand forever without touching truth. The decade that followed dressed trauma as triumph. London re-emerged as a hub for global speculation, cleaner, cleverer, colder. Finance detached completely from factory floors, from faces, from consequence. The city had become empire again, not of land, but leverage. Ordinary citizens measured recovery in headlines, not households. Austerity replaced investment. Resilience replaced reform. Slogans replaced substance. The pound floated freely, but freedom without foundation drifts faster than direction can correct. Britain balanced growth on gravity that wasn't there. Yet pride persisted, encoded in centuries of survival. Even wounded, the pound carried poetry, the weight of empire disguised as elegance. It still appeared on passports, pay slips, and politicians' promises. Symbolism, after all, is the cheapest currency to mint. Then, quietly, technology arrived to finish what time had started. Cryptocurrencies, contactless payments, and invisible exchanges questioned the need for symbols entirely. Younger generations traded value without ever touching value's texture. For them, the pound was heritage, not heartbeat. The bank adapted once more, its marble halls now humming with server racks. Economists spoke of blockchain with the reverence once reserved for bullion. History repeated, reframed, faith migrating from paper to programming, belief recoded again. The empire of sterling had dissolved into the cloud. Still, London refused irrelevance. It reinvented itself as mentor to the very markets that dethroned it. Where power was lost, prestige remained, consultancy replacing command, influence replacing ownership. The capital of capital became the curator of capitalism. Yet beneath that polished consultancy smile, fatigue lingered. Every innovation felt like adaptation, never ambition, reaction disguised as resilience. The pound survived each revolution by yielding sooner, softer, smaller. Its fall was not a collapse, but a continuous curve of accommodation. By the mid-2010s, Brexit reopened the ledger of identity and economics alike. National pride returned to politics, demanding borders in a borderless economy. The pound, faithful mirror of mood, fell again on referendum night, sharp, symbolic, undeniable. History had looped, reminding the island that sovereignty and solvency seldom coexist. The Bank of England steadied markets, while silence spread through living rooms and trading floors. Analysts debated percentages, citizens debated purpose. Neither could calculate how a nation measures itself once nostalgia outpaces growth. The pound answered by doing what it always had, adjusting, surviving, pretending. Through the noise, one truth endured: Britain's genius was never domination, but definition. It taught the world how to price belief, then learned to live inside its own formula. Even in decline, it dictated vocabulary, deficit, inflation, recovery, recession, words it once minted. The world still spoke its grammar of gain and loss. Thus, the pound's survival became paradox and poetry combined. Too weak to rule, too iconic to die, too British to surrender, too global to belong. Each fluctuation now felt like heartbeat, irregular but persistent, nostalgic but necessary. Its value lay not in price but in persistence. The bank, older than most nations, watched without emotion, its mission eternal repetition. It no longer protected empire. It preserved continuity, the illusion civilization needs to sleep. And so, the pound remained, diminished, digital, dignified, a relic refusing irrelevance. The crown was gone, yet the echo of its clink still haunted the vaults. By the dawn of the 21st century, the empire's ruins had learned to glow. The city's towers shimmered in glass, their reflections rising higher than Britain's confidence. The pound endured as emblem and echo, a heartbeat heard mostly in nostalgia. It was still money, yes, but now it was also metaphor. Inside the Bank of England, the hum of servers replaced the tick of pocket watches. Clerks no longer inked ledgers. Algorithms whispered transactions faster than thought. Gold once weighed ambition. Now ambition traveled weightless, measured in terabytes and trust. The empire of paper had become an empire of light. Every transaction left a ghost, a line of code in digital cathedrals of commerce. Britain's invention, the promise printed on paper, had mutated into data without memory. The bank still guarded faith, but faith now flickered behind firewalls. Invisible money required visible belief, and belief was harder to audit. The pound no longer ruled the world. It narrated it quietly, eloquently, persistently. Its image graced notes that few used and markets few fully understood. It had become a relic that still breathed, a ritual that refused irrelevance. Because symbols survive long after systems surrender. Brexit reignited the theatre of sovereignty, a referendum staged in arithmetic and emotion. Politicians spoke of taking back control, though control had migrated to code long before. The night of the vote, screens glowed green and red like battlefield flares. By dawn, the pound had fallen again, obeying mathematics, not manifestos. The bank responded with measured calm, issuing statements smoother than any victory speech. Markets trembled, adjusted, forgot. Citizens read headlines and carried on counting hours. Because Britain's true genius is not avoidance of collapse, but choreography of entrance. The pound fell gracefully, landing on centuries of habit. In meeting rooms, analysts debated parity with the dollar, as priests once debated scripture. But parity is a number, prestige is a story, and stories outlive statistics. The pound's strength lay not in its rate, but in its resonance. It still whispered of empire, etiquette, and the art of surviving decline politely. Meanwhile, new currencies were born without nations, minted by code and conviction. Bitcoin, Ethereum, stablecoins each promised liberation from centralized faith. Yet beneath their architecture lingered the same British blueprint, trust converted into transaction. Even rebellion carried the accent of the empire it opposed. The bank studied this new frontier with the patience of an old predator. It launched research, panels, pilot projects testing digital sterling, tokenized stability, programmable value. Every experiment felt like déjà vu, creating belief from binary instead of parchment. History, once again, rehearsed itself in perfect digital diction. In this silent revolution, the bank's power became philosophical. It no longer minted coins, it minted confidence. It no longer ruled colonies, it regulated algorithms. The throne had turned into a server rack, and sovereignty into software. Yet beyond London's circuitry, the human pulse persisted. Families still budgeted in pounds, still measured effort in wages, still trusted payday over policy. The pound remained their daily companion, less majestic, more mortal, quietly reliable. An empire's echo softened into household sound. Abroad, investors still treated sterling as heritage safe, stoic, slightly sentimental. It had become the antique watch of global finance, not the newest, but the most respected. When crises struck elsewhere, money still migrated to London's disciplined uncertainty. Because faith prefers familiar ghosts to unfamiliar gods. The COVID era tested every system again, compressing decades of panic into weeks. The bank moved faster than history, conjuring liquidity from code and calm from chaos. Stimulus replaced scarcity. Debt became duty. Survival became shared arithmetic. And once again, the illusion endured beautifully, efficiently, Britishly. When the world emerged blinking from lockdowns, the pound emerged lighter yet living, its paper redesigned, its value reimagined, its meaning reaffirmed by sheer persistence. It had outlasted empires, ideologies, currencies, and countless crises of confidence, because endurance itself had become Britain's last great export. Today, standing outside the Bank of England feels like standing before civilization's mirror. Stone columns, silent statues, windows reflecting algorithms in their ancient glass. Within those walls hums the software of survival. Outside, the world still spends belief. History breathes quietly there, disguised as modern policy. The bank knows it will never rule again, yet still dictates the rhythm of recovery. Its governors sign documents that echo the signatures of empire's architects. Every policy, every rate, every decimal carries centuries of accumulated caution. It is less institution now, more conscience and memory managing the present. And perhaps that is how empires truly live on, not in conquest, but in continuity. Rome left law, Britain left banking, both taught belief to behave like fact. The pound remains that lesson, folded neatly in wallets across a distracted planet, not valuable because it commands, but because it connects. Soon, a digital pound will appear, invisible yet official, modern yet familiar. It will promise speed, security, sustainability, all the virtues civilization claims in decline. But beneath the innovation, the same confession endures: fate still funds everything. Britain's oldest export continues belief wrapped in numbers. For all the falls, the pound never truly hits the ground. It hovers between relevance and ritual, to refine to vanish, to human to perfect. Its worth cannot be calculated. It must be remembered. And remembrance, not rate, is the true crown it still wears. History will judge Britain not by empire gained or glory lost, but by its genius for turning endings into beginnings that sound respectable. The pound's story is that genius decline narrated as dignity, weakness disguised as wisdom. A nation's currency turned mirror, reflecting the art of graceful survival. And if you listen closely, between interest rates and headlines, you can still hear the heartbeat of empire, steady, subdued, strangely soothing. The sound of a nation that taught the world to count, and then taught it how to keep counting even after losing the sum. If this story changed how you see power, money, and the ghosts of empire, remember belief builds systems, and systems always outlive those who built them. Subscribe for more untold histories of how Britain's past still programs the present. Because the next revolution in money won't be minted, it will be imagined.